Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors on Monday, November 18th, 2019. I will call the meeting to order. First item of business is to review the agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Scott has moved, or Jeff has moved, Santos has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Next up is to receive comments from the public. Anyone from the public wishing to address the board on a subject not already on our agenda? Seeing none, we'll move right along to item 4. Discussion and possible action to approve claims dated November 18th, 2019 in the amount of $931,849.02.
Move to approve. Second.
Scott has moved, Jeff has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Number 5, update on activities and discussions regarding ongoing funding for the Lower Cedar River Watershed Management Authority with LCR Watershed Coordinator Holly Howard. Good morning, Holly.
Good morning.
Please step on up to the podium for us.
It was right there.
Oh, okay. Awesome. So the Lower Cedar Watershed Management Authority is a watershed from the middle part of Cedar Rapids all the way down to Louisa County. And Muscatine has pretty much been a member of that for about 2 years, which is about how long it's been formed. And we've accomplished a lot in our past couple years. We've just received a $100,000 grant from the DNR to create a comprehensive watershed plan. And that will be for the whole stretch of the Lower Cedar. And that is a pretty big accomplishment considering we're such a young watershed. So that we've already done a great deal. And with that, there will be planning, looking at it through the whole scale. So they're going to look at all the data that we currently have collected through the watershed, and then we're going to do some water quality monitoring, and then we're going to do some outreach, and we're also going to look at a couple different smaller watersheds that are within the whole Lower Cedar watershed, and do some more in-depth study on those. And the hopes is once this this project is completed, that we will have enough documentation that there'll be the people who normally go over grants will be like, oh, you know something about your watershed, now you're eligible to receive more funds to do different projects within the watershed. And so the whole watershed is going to benefit for that purpose. And we've got a list of deliverables that we're going to be working on for it. So as you kind of look over that, these are some of the projects we're going to be doing, the deliverable grant. And by the end of it, so we are hiring a contractor to create the comprehensive watershed plan. So that's where most of the money will be going to. And it will be set for, that plan will be good for about 20 years. And then there will be a planned time to revise it at a later date once that 20 years is getting closer to completion. So that's just the basics of that. Another project that we've completed in that time is it's not completed, but we're working on, is the Mill Creek Watershed project. So that is one of the smaller watersheds within the Lower Cedar, excuse me, that resides in Johnson and Cedar County. And they're receiving their own little watershed plan. So that's being done through the Iowa Soybean Association. So that was basically another grant project that we received. So within 2 years, we've gotten some substantial things accomplished, especially with considering just that time frame, since that's when we've basically started until now. So that's a pretty big deal. And then another project that we have slated for the future is doing hydrologic study of the whole lower Cedar, which will give us a lot more in-depth information and pair well with the comprehensive watershed plan to better understand truly how water moves and how it actually behaves within the watershed. And that is kind of that final piece of that puzzle to have a more full understanding of the watershed, to where the different entities that do provide a lot of the grant funding will be like, all right, you've already got this in place, now you truly are ready to go, and have the different pieces of the puzzle that show, have basically some research behind where you're gonna say, well, we wanna do this project because of this. Right now, because we are lacking information about the whole watershed, they're often like, well, you're just kinda guessing where you wanna do projects, we wanna see where we're gonna get the best bang for the buck. And they don't like to provide, a lot of those grants don't provide the money to find that research, to find out where you need to focus your project dollars at. They want that already in place. So that's what the comprehensive watershed plan does, and the hydrologic study. So one of the benefits, big benefits of the WMA is just that it brings all the different entities, governmental entities within the watershed together so that they can work to accomplish goals beyond their jurisdictional boundaries at the watershed scale versus, this person's gonna work on this in their city, and this person's gonna work on this in their county. And sometimes those projects they're not necessarily working together and complementing each other. And so I think when we were working together across the whole watershed, we have a greater chance of truly accomplishing the goals that the different entities have, which most entities do have a lot of the same goals. They want to decrease the amount of flood damage that's done, they'd like to decrease the amount of flooding that's happening, and improve water quality for drinking, for recreation. Those are kind of across the board the goals that most people have echoed as part of the different entities, as well as some others as well. And that's what this WMA is working to do, and to seeking to be that format and that platform so that that can happen and those goals can be achieved. And to do that, right now there is no, so WMAs were allowed to be formed from the state as after the 2008 floods, and they gave us the go ahead to be created, but they didn't provide any funding to support the WMAs. And we are hoping that down the line that will change, possibly with the passing of I Will, but there's no guarantee when that will pass, if it passes, and then also exactly the funding structure for how the money for that will be used. But we are hoping that down the line there will be some money to support the WMAs. But in the meantime, what we have done to provide match for our grants and to be able to accomplish projects is we've asked the different entities that are part of the WMA to support. Muscatine County has supported us with a $500 donation for last year, which was a great start. And the matches that all the different counties have provided and the cities were what has allowed us to get the grants that we've gotten thus far. The Watershed Planning Grant asked for at least a $5,000 cash match. That's not in kind, it has to be cash. And so the donations that we've had thus far, we were able to utilize those for our cash match. And that is what enabled us to get the grant. If we hadn't had those donations, we would not have gotten the grant. So that was a huge deal that we had those. And the hydrologic study that we are wanting to complete, which is a whole Huck 8 scale, so from Cedar Rapids all the way down to Fredonia, that will be a $125,000 project, and they are asking, so that's a FEMA, it's basically FEMA money. that comes from. And we will need about $30,000 in match for that project. And I think our goal is to ask, go throughout the communities as well to ask for assistance in that to accomplish that project, since it's gonna benefit the whole watershed. But as a WMA, we would like to, our partners to be contributing members to that as well. And just as far as the counties go, most of the counties have been pretty supportive and made great donations. Johnson County, who holds about 20% of the watershed, they did $500 their first year and then $1,000 their second year, and they're also serving as the WMA's fiscal agent. So they've even with a small portion of the watershed, they've really stepped up and supported us pretty well. And Cedar County, which has quite a bit of the watershed, just like Muscatine County, they did $500 the first year, and then they did $1,000 for the second year. And Scott County, which has a fairly small portion of the watershed, they did $500 the first year, and they've already pledged to do $500 this the second year. And so counties have been pretty supportive, which has been good.
Yeah, so in the watershed meeting the other day, there's a few things that, you know, Holly maybe, so for the history of this, Holly's position was funded through a grant written by the Nature Conservancy to kind of get this whole WMA process started. And I think it was a great vision by the Nature Conservancy and to drive that. And they funded that position in 3 years, Holly, is that correct?
Yes.
So we have a little less than a year left on that. Now, there's gonna be some transitions and, you know, leadership there. Holly's got another role she's moving to, and that's all, you know, that happens in life. But what's become apparent in the WA meetings is that, you know, we really need to think about ongoing funding of that coordinator position. If that's something, you know, as you can see by the grants that have already been attracted, that there's an opportunity here to get money to do some of these projects that we all know we really need in the area. And I think the watershed approach is a pretty nice approach because it gets more people involved and you kind of attack the problems earlier. When we went through, just kind of, pardon my locker room spitballed the kind of the number, we think that we're targeting about $100,000 cost. We need to have some cash for, one, we need to fund a position, because you're not gonna do it without somebody. These are grant writers, they're grant positions, people that know where the money is and how to go after it and coordinate that. Johnson County has really stepped up and they are continue to ask, they are not asking, I don't think, they don't receive any compensation, they're just doing that out of the auditor's office to be the fiscal agent, and they're equipped and happy to do all the, deal with all the federal paperwork and stuff for the grants and do all that, so I think that works well. But you know, I think we need to think about how do we fund a bit for the position, and then also this, how do you build a little bit of a cash reserve as we go forward for these grant opportunities, like this hydrologic study that needs to be done. Is, you know, that's $30,000 cash match that this WMA is gonna have to put up at some point in the future, who knows when. And then you can only guess, we had that discussion at the last meeting is, you know, and we didn't have as many of the people with more watershed management. When this planning grant, you know, we're gonna go through this process, and one could only anticipate that they're gonna come up with, identify a lot of potential project opportunities. And, you know, that was my question is, has anybody seen what kind of, out of one of these plans, what were the results and how much money did we have to look for match raised to go after grants? We don't know that number yet, but, you know, I think it was important that Holly come now because we're all heading into budget time of year, and I think these are discussions we need to have, and you know, how much that Muscatine County would contribute to this effort as we move forward. There are some other interested parties that are, I think we're looking at how they can join the WMA. So we've had, for example, the city of Muscatine is not in the WMA or the watershed, Lower Cedar, but they are interested in it. and would like to have some kind of a role in it, they've said, potentially.
Yep.
They're exploring that before they take it to council, and I think those of us that live kind of on river towns, we know that all these watersheds get intermixed in our backyards at some point. So I think that's the intent of Holly coming in today to talk about that, is to begin the discussions and say, you know, what's the number? How many entities? 31 entities in this WMA, is that right?
There's 39 eligible, and then I think we have 31 participating right
Yeah.
now.
So you've got a pretty good cross-section of people, Lynn County, Johnson County, all the counties are on board. The SWDCs,
SWCDs.
CDs, okay.
Yeah.
So so Holly has been, an employee, I guess, so to speak, of the SWCD, Muscatine County SWCD, to date, because they have the ability to pay people and do that. So that's how that's resided in the Nature Conservancy. They're a subcontractor, I think, to the Nature Conservancy, who manages the grant. And the Nature Conservancy said they are willing to continue to do that and match it, you know, deal with those grant dollars, but again, that's about another year, right?
Yes, and we're hoping that we do have an extension for it. We're just not sure how exactly that's gonna look at, because part of that comes down to the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is who distributed the grant that supports my
Yeah,
position.
the challenge of it is, you know, good news, bad news is that the grant writing, I guess you gotta watch what you do, you know. But there were a number of goals that we put in, that, and, you know, we said at least, we'd do at least this much, and then it wound up in the grant as being shall be, as we're gonna do this much. And good news, bad news is we've already achieved all the goals we had. So we're kinda hoping that they'll say, hey, that's, you know, we really don't wanna stop overachievers, and we wanna continue that grant support for the effort, cause we're really getting into the meat of the work now.
Yes.
With this planning grant.
Anyone else?
So you can see by the sheet she handed out, that's just for that one grant, this is the amount of work that's going on. So as you can see, there's a lot of effort required, so they're putting together committees now to do these different activities on this grant. And it's pretty much all volunteer time. There are no paid professionals in any of this. Really what we have to do is have cash matches on some of the grants.
It's the old adage, spend money to get money, and luckily, you know, we only had to provide 5% to get $100,000. So 5% is pretty good return of our investment, so that's pretty awesome. So we're hoping to keep having those opportunities, and like the lower Cedar, the middle Cedar, theirs was a little bit different because they were selected as a priority watershed by the state of Iowa, back around, I think, 2008, well, 2010. That's when most of the rules from 2008 ended up coming down and out of the, out through as final legislation. And they got millions of dollars of grants to be working on projects, and we may not ever get the golden child status completely like the middle Cedar, but even if we got, you know, just a portion of funds, that would allow great projects to be happening here in the lower Cedar.
And just an FYI, in this planning process, the hazard mitigation plan, and I know Brian's been in the loop a little bit on this, so this will all be coordinated. I think Bi-State is assisting as well.
Yes.
in making sure that our hazard mitigation plan and the watershed plans all link up, and so they're, because I know we have a couple of areas in our hazard mitigation plan that we've identified in Muscatine County as a priority, and that's all incorporated into this document and into this process. So they'll be identified.
Holly, as you're forming these teams, have you reached out, or have you guys looking at the university or Iowa State? They have
Yes.
programs similar to this, to looking at maybe teaming up or combining some resources?
Yes, so one of the committees that we're forming is the Technical Advisory Committee, and the main goal of that is going to be working to make sure that this plan works well with the hazard mitigation plans of all the counties. And one of the partners that we already have on board would be the Iowa Flood Center and then the University of Iowa. I forget which department it is, but we have contacted them and they said they're interested in being a part of it and serving as a technical advisor to work on that. And then the Iowa State Water Center already serves as a partner to support the WMAs of the state.
That's good to know.
It is. Hi, thank you so much. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action to approve or disallow the 2019 Family Farm Credit applications as recommended by the Muscatine County Assessor. And we have Elaine Clark at the Assessor's Office here. Good morning, ma'am.
Morning. Yes, this year we have one disallowance that I want to talk about. But the signing period ended November 1st for the 2019 Family Farm Credit. We are recommending to the board to disallow one application this year. The property owner, Hank House Trust, their cousin cash rents the farm, and according to Iowa code, cousins do not qualify as a family member. So that's the first. And then our new applications, we are recommending to allow all those applications. The applications were for properties classified as agriculture, where there were changes to the ownership or purchase of new ground or change in the farmer. That's why there are new applications. And we're recommending to allow those. And so does anyone have any questions? Otherwise, our recommendation to the Board of Supervisors is to approve allowance or disallowance for the 2019 Family Farm Credit applications as presented. So,
I'll move to approve as presented.
Jeff has moved to approve as presented and Scott has seconded. Is there any discussion? Do we need a roll call on this one? All right, all those in favor of approving and disapproving as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
thank you.
Item number 7, items with County Engineer Keith White.
Disallowance is in there.
Good morning, Keith.
Okay.
Good morning. First item, we have 2 utility permit applications this morning. The first from Eastern Iowa Light and Power of Wilton, Iowa. And basically on 155th Street, just west of Elder, where we just had a bridge project, replacing the bridge with a box culvert. They are restringing their lines that came down for our project, and they want to add one pole to shorten one of their spans right at that bridge location. And the second is Unite Private Networks of West Des Moines, Iowa. And essentially on Elder Avenue near Elder Ridge, there's a cell tower on top of the hill there. Across the road, Verizon has constructed a new cell tower. And so they basically want to bore fiber optic across the road to connect the 2 cell towers. That's the 2 applications.
I'll move to approve.
Jeff has moved, Scott has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
7B.
Okay, and we have a resolution proposing to designate a portion of Tucker Avenue as a level C road. This is the dead end of Tucker south of New Era that's currently a level B. So essentially adding a gate, which then allows only law enforcement and property owners basically to and the road department to legally be in there.
Is it a locked gate, Keith, or just?
It is a locked gate.
Yeah. So we have controlled access, basically?
Yes, controlled access.
And this has been a level B?
it's been a level B as long as I've been here, since before I was here.
So typically, when you go to a level C, what's that process? What triggers that process? Is this a request of the landowners, or is this something you and staff kind of approach landowners?
They changed the code some years ago now that the board, in consultation with the county engineer, can designate a road level C. In the past, it's been by petition from the adjoining landowners. Here we've just had communication with folks out there that are interested in making this a level C. It's not required that we have a petition.
So the landowners are okay with this?
That's my understanding.
So I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Jeff is moved, Santos is seconded. Any further discussion? This one is a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Santos?
Aye.
I vote aye. Scott?
Aye.
And aye. Motion passes. Projects update.
Okay, since we weren't here last week, we were gone for Veterans Day, the bridge project, which is a box culvert replacing on 150th, that was opened to traffic a week ago. There's still some erosion control work on the site, but the road is open to traffic. And the work, the FEMA work on Salisbury Road has started with bronze construction. They got about 3/4 of the dirt work done, and so hopefully they will finish the dirt work and get the flowable down perhaps yet this week. And then one item to mention, if you recall, at one point we approved an extensive fiber network that Mid-American Power is doing all over the state, hooking their sites together and that, and just kind of wanted to mention there's been some issues with their subcontractor, with their contractors and their borings, and right now they're currently redoing their work, so, and not just in this county but in others, so I guess it's worth saying we've got a fair amount of time into dealing with that. I don't know how we separate out the large ones and the small ones. I'm gonna have to think about that, but we are going to have to think about starting to charge on these things. We are, sometimes they take really inordinate amounts of staff time. You would think the owners would provide sufficient supervision, but they seem to not. So it's not the disaster like CenturyLink wasn't by any means, but if we weren't paying attention, there'd be stuff not at all where it was permitted to be. So that's for down the road, food for thought.
So when they get done doing their work, how do we don't locate, they don't draw up, they don't end up finishing giving us as-built?
No,
We just assume that that's where they said they were gonna go.
to an extent, that's correct.
What are our permit fees, Keith? Do we get fee scheduled for that?
Right now, in this standard statewide permit, the inspection fee is $1,000 with them to, as a prepayment. If I read the utility permit will be issued by the county engineer contingent upon the applicant's agreement to pay the actual costs directly attributable to the installation and inspection, if any, conducted by the county engineer. Prepayment is not required, blah, blah. We typically do not charge.
So there is a mechanism in code for us to
There
bill
is.
back time
There
for
is.
this activity.
And I'm just, you know, sometimes it's a small entity, it could be an individual, you know, asking to take a water line or a power line across to a shed, you know, a farmer. And we typically haven't said, yeah, give us this $1,000 up front. And we've kept that universal, but I don't know if we're gonna wanna think about scale and start asking for the fee up front, or what we're gonna do, but.
Well, I just remember back a few years ago when we were having some of the difficulty with that, whatever project it was, I think when the broadband was going throughout the county, and your staff spent a lot of time. We got backed up because your staff was spending time babysitting contractors for utilities that should be babysitting themselves. So I don't, you know, I have a problem with the taxpayer dollars spent on that, and, you know, the utilities are getting paid to do that, they should do that.
Right. So, it's down the road, but I think we're gonna have to start thinking about that again. Other thing on projects update, we're done with the design on phase 2 of our shop area, parking, paving, and we'll have to decide if we're going to a letting or if we're gonna change orders under our last project, which is what we discussed, but, you know, a fair amount of time has passed. And we have 2 projects in the DOT letting tomorrow. One is the bridge on 120th west of West Liberty, and the other is the T28 project from basically the 61 interchange out to High Prairie. That's the only things that are really new there. And under other, I would just, you know, we've had a couple rounds of snow, and now we're you know, have a little break here, but don't know if you will wish that I should go through the snow ordinance with you, or if you just wanna look at it. It's in the code of ordinances. I guess the simplest thing would be, you know, we don't run a 24/7 snow removal operation, and clear, dry pavement is not required or expected by our snow ordinance, even though we often achieve that. And we haven't had to run out in the country yet, but, you know, the ordinance calls for 1 lane open for everybody before we widen out. So usually those calls start from particularly the people who moved out in the country. It's 5 AM, it's snowing like heck, but why is not the road clear? Because that's not part of our operation. And a lot of counties, and I believe this one back a ways when these model ordinances first came out, did not run on weekends or holidays. And I can tell you, you know, we had a goodly storm on a holiday here. We ran, but we had neighbors that did not run. And the old lecture that we need to follow our snow ordinance if we want to be protected in the courts. So we had a few people call up and yell right as the snow was coming down. So
don't normally run when there's 50-mile-an-hour winds.
yeah.
And it's dangerous for the equipment to be out there. It gets kind of costly for the maintainer in the ditch.
Maybe, I don't know if it'd be helpful, if you could provide a summary to David, and the journal could maybe print a very blurby kind of rundown of what we do so people can understand. That's something you guys can do. Does that make sense?
Sure.
This is the expectation.
Yep.
I like that because, you know, people don't understand snow removal in a city versus out in the country is a whole different world. You're not dealing with typically the winds and the drifting and
About the miles covered.
the miles covered.
And that,
That's a lot of snow.
The actual difference between city versus county is huge. I mean, you could probably quantify that by about 3 or 4 times easily the size of it.
Yeah, I don't know how many miles of road do you,
Well, for the snow and ice control, so, you know, hard surface, sanding, salting, you know, about 220, so.
A lot of miles of gravel roads.
Yeah, and then another over 400 miles of gravel, but, and we were really maybe kinda on the edge depth-wise, but until, normally this doesn't start until the roads are frozen up, they're not frozen up, so if we put motor graders out there, we destroy the road, so they're not, have not been out on the gravels and probably won't be for a while.
All right, thank you.
thanks, Keith.
Anything else, Keith?
That's all I have,
Alrighty, thank you, sir.
thanks.
Item number 8 is discussion and possible action to adopt ordinance 11-18-19-01, rezoning certain real property in Wapsie Township, Muscatine County, Iowa, from A1 agricultural district zoning classification to R1 residential zoning district classification. This is the third and final reading.
Move to approve.
Jeff has moved, Scott has seconded. This is a roll call vote. Doug?
Aye.
Scott? Aye. I vote aye. Jeff?
Aye.
Santos?
All right.
All ayes, it's approved. Number 9 is the second tier canvass of the city and school elections held on November 5th, 2019, where Muscatine County is the control county. And just to explain to everyone, this is necessary where we have districts and whatnot that overlap into other counties, and we had to compile our votes with theirs. Sometimes we're the control county, sometimes others are. These are the ones where we are.
Yes. And so we'll get started. What I handed out to you is the compilation of the canvas summary, which does start with our totals and adds in the counties that we also had to get totals from for the same offices for which we are the control county. So we'll start out with City of Wilton. Cedar County also has some people in the City of Wilton. So we'll start out with City of Wilton Mayor. The final results after adding in Cedar County are Robert Barrett, 274, Corey Freeman, 211, 0 scattered, 0 overvote, 2 undervote. So Robert Barrett is elected. For City of Wilton Council Member at Large, after Cedar County is added in, we have Cheryl Lanker, 343, Ted Maroff, 342, Jim Driscoll, 153, Wayne Budding, 404, Michael Rohr, 100, 5 scattered, 0 overvotes, 114 undervotes. So it was an elect 3, so Cheryl Lanker, Ted Maroff, and Wayne Budding are elected. Next we have Louisa Muscatine School Board members and elect 3. That one crosses over into Louisa County, so we had to get their results. So after adding in Louisa County's results to our results, Barbara Thompson has 175, Bryce Kendall Hoban 252, Stacy Ziegenhorn 166, Carol Ann Whitaker 222, Jonathan Morgan 89, 11 scattered, 3 overvotes, 138 undervotes. So Bryce Kendall Hoban, Carol Ann Whitaker, and Barbara Thompson were elected. West Liberty School Board members and elect 3. This one crosses over into Cedar County and Johnson County. So after adding in both of those counties' results, Jacob Burrows has 267, Jeff Laughlin 224, Carla Shield 298, Christian Torres 178, David Millage 160, Kathleen Garrido 213, 2 scattered, 6 overvote, 191 undervotes. So Carla Shield, Jacob Burrows, and Jeff Laughlin were elected. And finally, we have Wilton School Board members and elect 3 crosses over to Cedar County. After including Cedar County's results, Ginny Harris received 323, Jeremy Wise received 356, Timothy Barrett 426, Linda A. Duncan 397, 28 scattered, 0 overvote, 231 undervotes. Timothy Barrett, Linda A. Duncan, and Jeremy Wise were elected. And that's the completed canvas for the city and school
Let's
election.
do you have a special one for society, you want us to sign one of these?
No, I have one for you to sign, with a bunch of other stuff for you to sign. So everybody has to sign after the meeting.
Alrighty. Thank you. Item 10 is discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of the November 4th, 2019 regular meeting.
No, you,
I sent out a revised agenda that added a new
yeah.
10.
You're right, you did. I'm sorry. Discussion and possible action to approve the FY 2019 urban renewal annual report with Leslie.
This is just an annual report since we have the SSAB urban renewal area and the Van Meter one. We have to report to the state every year where we stand on that one, how much, and I sent that out to you in the packet, how much we still owe, how much we paid out for the year, that sort of thing. This is just our one for the fiscal year that just ended in June. So,
Yeah, I move to approve.
Second.
Jeff has moved. Santos is second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's approved. Okay, now item number 11. Discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of the November 4th, 2019 regular meeting and the November 13th, 2019 special meeting.
Move to approve.
Second. Jeff has moved, Scott has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
It is approved. Item number 12, correspondence. Santos?
I just had a meeting on Thursday of last week in regards to a youth center that they're looking at wanting to possibly open up, combining some of the cities of Columbus Junction and Fredonia and Columbus City. It's kind of a youth program that I was looking at working with, so that's all I have.
Jeff?
No correspondence.
Let's see, I had lots of varying correspondence on mental health region issues. I also had a contact from a county resident who has a neighbor they think may be appropriate for our trustee program, and I referred that over to Felicia. Yeah?
I had nothing.
No.
Correspondence, Monday, November 4th, right after our meeting, I got a call from resident Hammer Trailer Court that their septic system was overflowing, and I called Eric, and he went down and made some phone calls. Got a call. That was all taken care of. So that's it, correspondence. I attended a SLAG meeting in Wilton on Thursday, November 14th at 6 o'clock. Saturday, the 16th, the fair board met at the fairgrounds. We put all the benches, cleaned out the bottom of the amphitheater, got everything ready for the winter. We met with the Truck Drag Association, and they took a look at our track, and we're talking, they might be racing their Thursday at the fair. And also, maybe some other times in between, for a full show, they said it takes 45 hours. Because they have that many cars, and we need to hold it down to about 2 for fair. So they're bringing pro stocks, middle of the line, and then the outlaws, which would be the top class. Try to hold that 2 hours. Also on Sunday, the board met up there. I didn't go to that one. We've got the Barrel Association wants to start barrel racing up there using the horse arena facilities, so we're gonna be doing that. And today we'll have the announcement on who's gonna be our entertainment for Saturday night for the concert. So I'll have a full lineup next time we meet.
Okay.
I had no committee reports.
Okay, let's see. Last Friday, I had the 7th Judicial District Correctional Board meeting. I also had, pull my calendar, on Wednesday of last week, Felicia and I attended the Southeast Iowa Link regional meeting, the SEAL meeting down in Mount Pleasant. Excuse me. On Thursday, November 7th, I attended the Eastern Iowa Region's management team meeting, which is normally only a meeting of directors. And then on Monday, November 4th, I had the Public Health Lean Leadership meeting over at Public Health.
I had on the 12th, I had the Lower Cedar Water Management Authority meeting. That was it.
No, thanks.
Thank you all. Item number 14 is to receive information from county employees. Felicia Topper, Community Services. Imagine you've got a few things to share with us.
Oh,
It's been a fun couple of weeks.
as Nathan mentioned, we went to the SEAL board meeting, and you're all aware that, we were not accepted into the, SEAL region at this moment. I wanna make sure that you have the letter. This was a fiscal committee met with Julie Jetter from DHS, who is a consultant. And this was their recommendation that we received the day of that, was it Monday? It was Monday morning, I think. It was the 12th. And it kind of falls in line with, sure, it falls in line with the, kind of how the discussion went in general with regard to the, board meeting. And we had a relatively, in-depth discussion, with that board. And, what we came away with was that they were very empathetic to, what we were wanting to do, and not necessarily saying, we won't even entertain the motion, but, they came away with, the understanding from Julie Jetter of DHS that they needed to make a decision that day. And, in fairness, when I asked Julie for the code or rule that, that she had cited to give them that impression, she denied that she ever gave them that impression. So regardless, the board made a decision on the spot last week based on our application. And some of their concerns were related to, the financial pieces, how to get us incorporated in when they were gonna start working on their budget in December. And it's a lot to do. I felt pretty strongly that we could do it, but I think the board wanted some time to really think it through. And in fairness, I think we all would have made the exact same decision, that we would have put it off or held off a little bit to doing that. On November 6th, I sent an email to Julie Jetter to ask if there was any paperwork that we need to do for the purposes of DHS and leaving the Eastern Iowa region, and she said there was not. But one of the things she also said was that, if both SEAL and East Central region say no, Muscatine would become an orphan county and the department would assign you to a region. We had to do this with some counties in CSS last year. We assigned the counties back to CSS. It's likely you would be assigned back to the Eastern Iowa region if this occurs. Very frankly, I'm hoping that we can have a conversation about that with DHS, because I don't think it's in anybody's best interests for us to return back to the Eastern Iowa region when, in point of fact, we're going to lose a significant amount of services in FY21 and FY22. We already know that they're gonna have to cut at least $4 million out of the budget. And $4 million, there's not a lot of fat in that budget except in those services that are not core and core plus. And even in the presentation that they're talking, that they're gonna be making today, there's some talk about moving protected payee. And if you remember, we talked about moving protected payee and ran into some resistance. And Sherry's found that resistance that DHS have may not coincide with the state auditor's understanding of what we can and cannot do. So, what I wanted to show you was something that I found to be exceptionally interesting as part of the presentation today that I think you're going to want to know about. And these are the fiscal agent recommendations that the board, Eastern Iowa Region, is going to be looking at today. And I can honestly say in all of my review of all the documents for the Eastern Iowa Region, when I first started, I've never seen anything like this before. And the reason that it interests me is because, and you can get the whole presentation today. The reason that this is interesting is because there is an acknowledgement that Scott County has not paid their fair share. This is the first time I've ever seen anything in writing. And if you look at the fiscal agent agreement, probably the thing that stands out the most is that they're recommending that Muscatine County not put in the $311,300. And I'm not gonna read this recommendation to you. I'm gonna have you flip to the second page and have you take a look at this. I know, I've looked at this several times trying to figure it out, and I think I almost have it, but if you take a look at the first column, these are county expenditures as of October 2019.
And this is historically over the life of the region.
Yes, that's correct.
This is expenditures only.
Expenditures by the counties only. Okay? And then there's region expenditures per capita, and that's at fiscal agent fund. And you can see what's been paid out of that fiscal agent fund. And then the third column is all of those numbers totaled together. And then we go to the fourth column, which is net contributions by each county.
So Scott County has failed by $2 million to pay for.
And it shows that it came from exactly what we've been saying all
Yep.
along, from, Clinton, Cedar, and Muscatine counties. This is, finally we get the financial analysis we've been talking about for 2 years,
Yes,
to highlight who created the problem and how deep the problem is.
yes.
It took quite a bit of shaking. I mean, not only our leaving, I mean, basically every meeting I've asked David Farmer to do this, to show it like this, I've asked Lori to do this. They still didn't. Clinton County has been asking them to do this through Jim Irwin, their member. And when I saw this come out a couple days, I guess in the middle of last week, I thought, what the heck, why are they now coming clean? So I called up Jim Irwin and Clinton, I said, I was just tongue in cheek, what did you guys threaten to leave too? And he said, well, not exactly, but he did let it be known that they had discussions with the other region that they neighbor, just looking into it. And, I don't know if Scott got scared straight or what the deal is, but I'm sure Felicia's gonna have more discussions, especially on Scott County's positioning itself to be a hero here.
It is, at least in the presentation, it is the intention of Scott County, because they are going to have the 70+% fund balance at the end of the year, to contribute more dollars to the fiscal agent fund going forward. And you can see that in the fiscal agent recommendations.
So who made these recommendations, or who drew this up?
These
Where
are
did we
from the
get?
fiscal agent, who is also the fiscal agent for Scott County, David Farmer.
So David Farmer, the guy that was here a couple weeks ago.
Correct.
And in terms of where these, I was not party to any discussions with regard to this at all. So I'm not sure where this came from. Nathan mentioned coming to basically a management meeting with Robert Young. And I have to tell you, it was enlightening in terms of, how we're working with Robert Young. And, it's really important, I think, at this point, at least for us, trying to go forward with a different region, is we can't even produce any of the contracts and subcontracts for crisis services to even be able to start to have those discussions with the SEAL region, because we've never seen them.
I specifically requested last week all of the region's contracts and subcontracts. I was told that I'd already received them in 3 different packets that we had in the spring. I went back and looked at what we'd received. For the most part, I think with one exception, in about 15 contracts, we received rate sheets, which are not contracts.
And
They'll bill you after they get done.
Any
with
more than,
services.
yeah, any more than the
'Cause they
menu
got
up
the
at
rates.
McDonald's when you walk in is a contract.
so I think that's one of our first steps that we really need to get to, is being able to see what those contracts look like. And I realize that there's subcontracts with Robert Young. And I understand that, the region contracts with Robert Young to provide and manage all of the crisis services, to which their funding comes out of the fiscal agent fund. But regardless, we need to have a place to start if we're gonna start to look at what can we do and what can't we do at this point, and really evaluate our position. I'm hoping that Nathan can probably get a response with regard to that, cause I have never seen any of those contracts. So I have no idea what's in them. At this point, to tell you that I know what the next best thing to do is I truly don't know what the next best thing to do is, except that I think we need to sit down and have a thorough discussion with DHS and indicate to them that we would like to have their cooperation in working out some of the details that SEAL region wants to know about and have more information about, so that we can continue to move ahead with that if the SEAL region is going to be in any kind of a position to make a decision. I mean, they can't make a decision on information they don't have.
A couple of things I'm thinking about here. One is, we are a member of Eastern Iowa until next fiscal year.
Correct.
So, you know, it's a mess right now, right? I mean, and so, I think one of the things that I'm hearing from you is, and I don't know if, does DHS have an understanding of what they have on their hands here? You know, that this region has been mismanaged fiscally, and from mostly fiscally and managerial issues I see. You know, that we don't have we have a $4 million contract, but it's really not a contract. Because if you can't produce a contract, I don't have a contract with you, right? A rate sheet is not a contract, clearly not a contract. So maybe the hole's not as deep as we think, maybe we don't have the $4 million, we don't know. But whatever, but, you know, regardless of whether Muscatine County is a part of this region or not, there is a management issue here at a high level that we're not, you know, this is taxpayer resources and critical services for taxpayers in Iowa. And DHS needs to step in here and get involved, I think, because, you know, this ship needs to be righted pretty quickly.
Well, DHS, the annual plans, the annual reports, all of the budgets are reviewed and approved by DHS. So, I would assume that when they read the budget, they were very well aware that, the Eastern Iowa region had budgeted way over the amount of their revenue. I mean, you all knew that, so I can only assume that DHS knows that. To my knowledge, in anything I've read in terms of, and I've gone through all the minutes back to 2017, 2016, and there has been no concerns raised by DHS that the Eastern Iowa region was going to put itself in some serious fiscal difficulty. And maybe that's because they're only looking at the budget and they're only looking at the annual reports. But I know that when I look at my budget and I say, gosh, I'm overspending by $3 million, that somebody is not going to say, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that. So, I'm really hoping that we can get DHS to take a look at, our situation and assist us with providing the SEAL region with the information they want and need to see about next steps in terms of going to that region, if that's even possible. And I completely understand the issue of the management, and I think we can have that discussion with Julie Jetter as well, because she is the consultant for the Eastern region. So, that's the best recommendation I have for you right at the moment. We have a board meeting today, Eastern Iowa region, and they were made fully aware last week that the SEAL region fiscal committee had made a decision to not recommend our acceptance of the application at this time. And yet, on the agenda still remains that we are going to be exiting. So I think that's been communicated relatively clearly, so.
And a couple of things I would add to that. Number one, either DHS did know about the budget shortfall issues when it signed off on them, or it didn't. I'm not sure which is worse, but I think DHS has been part of the problem and needs to be part of the solution. Second, what you don't see, because we didn't give you the whole voluminous report that we had to parse through, but with the intent to forgive Muscatine County its 2020 fiscal year $311,000 contribution, Scott County apparently has agreed to put in, or is proposing to put in $650,000 at the end of the fiscal year in addition to their contribution. I spoke with Ken Beck from Scott County Supervisors, and he said this is something that they anticipate doing for the next 3 years. So a total of right close to 1.9 million. Which interestingly is exactly the amount they show as being under-contributed, or at least not under-contributed, but it was the break-even point to where their contributions would equal the region's services, except for the fact that in the next 3 years, the region's also going to expend money on Scott County, so it doesn't even get them to even. The other thing I think is interesting about this is the $650,000 transfer that Scott County is proposing and doing will get the fiscal agent fund, so the region's pot, to more or less zero. I think 25,000, but that's such a blip in terms of the size of 12 million. That it could go either way. So basically they're bringing the fiscal agent fund neutral, which will not cash flow at the end of the year. So Scott County is going to be called upon to make additional transfers because again, they're going to be the only ones that have any money. So, I'm sure that Scott County is expecting to look like a hero in this. Whereas at the very minimum, they're still not getting an even level of contribution. There's still going to be a net withdrawal even after 3 years from the fiscal agent fund. So certainly appreciate that they're stepping up with something. In my opinion, it's nowhere near enough to save the region. This is something that probably had to happen 3 years ago. But
And it's nowhere near the level it should be.
no, it's not. And so, I see it as largely cosmetic. It's not going to fix the region's problems. But even so, it'll still leave Scott with a pretty penny in their coffers. So, they've started to recognize the issue. I don't know if they are fully aware, but, Clinton is really close to the same problem. And if Clinton hadn't gotten $1.7 million out of the fiscal agent fund in the last year, they'd be exactly where we are right now. So, this is far from over. And with regard to the us being forced to join one of the other regions, or DHS forcing us into a region, I think the rationale, and then we're going to be reaching out to those counties that DHS mentioned that were forced back into their region. But I think the rationale for forcing someone's back is, hey, this is the region you came from, you know it, your contracts are aligned, it's easiest for you to go back there. Well, I think that that is not an applicable argument for our situation. Here's why. Number one, as Felicia indicated, we don't have contracts. We don't know how to align our services. Number two, David Farmer's budget also indicates that Robert Young, whom we currently pay up to $4 million a year in management fees, is not going to get a dime in management fees in years going forward. In other words, we're not going to have a professional contract manager in Eastern Iowa region going forward, meaning every individual community services director is going to have to play some role in managing contracts. And frankly, that's what they do in the SEAL region. You know, so-and-so is responsible for these types of contracts. The other person over here is responsible for, you know, X, Y, and Z contracts. So it's going to be a completely different system that we would be forced being into. In other words, they may say, we're sending you home, but there's no more home. It's a completely different region we would be going back to, not only with the management changes, but with the 1/3 reduction in budget. So we really want to sit down with DHS and make these points and help them to understand, you know, their mission, as I read it and as they're stated, is to help people connect with services. And frankly, if DHS forces us back into the Eastern Iowa region, they're going to be doing the opposite. They are not going to be helping us connect people with services. They're going to be stripping services away from people. And I think it would be really short-sighted and a poor move morally, a poor move politically for DHS to take that tack with us.
Well, I wanna do a little bit of correction for you, Nathan.
Sure.
That Robert Young Center gets $4 million in a contract. They have 10%, they have 400,000 in management.
I'm sorry,
All the
you're
rest of
right.
it goes out to
You're right.
crisis services. However, he's absolutely correct in the fact that if you don't have Robert Young managing all those subcontracts that we have not seen, that somebody is going to have to, one, RFP and contract all over again, and somebody is going to have to manage those contracts. And in the process, we also have to have a child mental health coordinator in place by July 1st, 2020. And it is the intention, at least at this point, of the management team that that person needs to be hired from the outside. My concern lies in the fact that we're going to pull out $4 million out of consumer services, and we're gonna hire a child mental health coordinator. And are we also, in the Eastern region, going to have to hire somebody to manage all of these contracts? Because RFPs and contracting is not an easy, a real easy and simple process. It is a process, and you have to be aware of what that process is.
Right, and there's been no RFPs in the Eastern Iowa region, you know, for these millions of dollars of services, and that's been covered ostensibly because it's routed through Robert Young, but frankly, these sorts of things should be going out for bid. You know, and then there is an organization out there, the decategorization folks, that could already, that already do handle a lot of this, and could certainly handle it for Eastern Iowa, for SEAL, for whomever who needs it.
So, to Nathan's point, regardless if DHS says you're going back to the Eastern Iowa region, whatever service array that we had in the past is not gonna be the same going forward in
Yeah.
FY '21. It's just not gonna be the same.
Like a kid goes away for college, his parents sell their home, move into a condo, he can't go back to his old room. He's not there anymore.
Well, I'm the eternal optimist. I see hope in that recognition by the fiscal agent and the leadership in Eastern Iowa as to who has created this crisis that we're now in. The challenge I still see is, I don't think, but this again, I think goes back to, you know, I think we have some great social workers, but I'm not sure we have great managers and leaders on the fiscal side, and now that's one thing I think, hindsight being 2020 always, that when we moved to regionalization, we took directors and folks that were more service oriented, and really we should have been looking for different skill sets. we're looking for contract managers and program direct, different people. And I think we're paying a price for that right now.
Yeah, that's part of the reason we had trouble with Vera French this year. So,
When would DHS make this decision?
You know, I really don't know. I know that they were gonna give us an opportunity to go with the East Central region, but the East Central region is the largest mental health region in the state by population. And, in the fact that we had the meeting with Seal on the 13th, to put an application in with the East Central region, one, not knowing what their basic fiscal philosophy is at all, and not understanding what their service mechanisms are. I think it wouldn't even be prudent for us to consider the idea of going to East Central region.
and we would have had to have done it by last Friday.
Yes,
And East Central is Lynn, Johnson,
yes,
Yep.
Dubuque,
Dubuque, yeah.
And based on the conversations I had with Jim Irwin, he suggested that there are some big county, small county philosophical differences at play in that region as well, which we'd be jumping right back into.
But it sounds to me like they're gonna be dealing with the same issues.
Yeah.
So, as far as Seal goes, when they say that it was a difficult decision to make with short notice, is kind of the way I kind of read into it,
yes.
from their perspective, which is it's a major decision, it's adding a lot of complexity potentially, and maybe just things for them, we're just saying, hey, let's just avoid making this decision quickly without having enough information. Can we, as a group, still look at them and still say, okay, what can we do? How can we provide you this information to remove any of this complexity, confusion, and challenges that you're facing? Because, I mean, I still think they're a program and a group that I think that we as a county should be looking at. The fact if DHS comes back and tells us, hey, you need to go back to where you're from, doesn't really, I don't think that they have the knowledge that we have as regards to what we're doing. In regards to also the comment I think that was mentioned by, they should have been able to see a lot of what we're going through and all of these budget downfalls and potential issues that we were gonna run into. I wonder if they've ever had anything as difficult or a budget challenge as what we've seen now. I mean, in their defense, has there ever been this much of a mismanagement of a budget that has created this challenge that we have? So, I mean, maybe having those conversations with them, understanding that, because even if you reviewed all of those things back from 2017 forward, has the county ever gone through what we're going through right now? That they could come back in and say, well, they probably don't look at those budgets because it's not their responsibility. Their budget is to connect to programs. They're not responsible for budgeting, that's us, or those boards that you're sitting on. So, I think in their defense, I think I can look at that from that perspective, but my request is, how do we still build those relationships and create better connections with the SEAL group, if it's from our group or from your group, Felicia, and saying, how do we get that? Okay, we're not joining this July 1st, what do we need to do to help build that? Because that's really what I think I'm at. I don't wanna sit here and say, well, what's gonna happen if we don't make this happen? I wanna know, how do we make that happen? Tell me what you need. Those are the questions that I think we need to be having with them versus just saying, let's just look at what's gonna happen when they kick us out. I don't even wanna think about that. I wanna know, how do we build that relationship? Tell me, Miss Julie Jetter, what we need to give you to help you understand that we're physically responsible, we're wanting to give you our funds, we wanna help our community get connected with your programs. So that's what my question is what do we need to do, or what steps should we be taking now as a board?
And
to
all
help
that
build
you
that?
described is exactly what I would recommend. I think the first thing is I need to get in touch with Ryan.
CEO of the SEAL Link.
And do we essentially get a do-over because their immediate decision-making was based on inaccurate
We can
information?
submit our application at any time. The November 15th deadline for applications is where it's automatically reviewed. if we submit it after November 15th, the seal board has the option to waive the November 15th deadline if they want to. So we would do it by resubmitting.
I would totally, yeah, if we can do that, that's,
And so
that's really what I'm trying to get at. This whole kicking us out and going to DHS to find out what happens afterwards, I will cross that bridge when we get there. I would rather right now work on, how do we build this? Tell me what you need. Do you need the CRX books? Do we need to share? You need to provide the numbers? Do we need to show you? Build that over the next 2-3 months and then say, okay, can you review us in April? Can you give us an opportunity to look at the fact that we are a county that really wants to help build a better connection with you guys and be part of the team?
And I sent an email to Ryan last week. The board had asked me to provide them with a transition plan that I had come up with in terms of if we were accepted, how we would go about that. And so I sent that to her and I asked her about the list that was made in the fiscal committee, because there was a director there that mentioned there was a whole list of things that they wanted to know about this, and I asked her if we could get that list so we could start to provide them with that kind of information, and I have not heard back from her. But I don't know that she's not on vacation. I know she had some family issues too, so.
Well, and it's been, 2 business days.
Yeah,
So.
And yeah, if there's anything that you think about that we could do as a board, or making those, connections, or going down there to some of their meetings, getting a chance to see some of these face to face. I think from my perspective, listening to what you're saying and how I read through this is, they probably look at it as saying, are they gonna join the team and become a burden, or are they gonna join the team and add value?
absolutely.
And I think that from our perspective, we know that we're gonna add value, but from their perspective, it may be, hey, these guys they're leaving, but why? What's going on? And I totally can respect the fact that they just like when we talked about leaving, it was not a decision that we wanted to make on a first day's notice. I mean, it was ultimately months and years of challenges that we've gone through that have got us to this point. So it's not gonna be somebody's gonna come over and we're not out hitchhiking with the thumb out there. We're actually looking at wanting to invest into a group that we think that we're gonna add value to. So I think that's what my request is, to give us, a couple of to-do things, or maybe some items that you can look at as a high level and saying, hey, this is how we can build those relationships, get those connections, tell us some options that you think that would help us. And then if it's something like, what Nathan was mentioning, they can waive it, we can resubmit it. I believe that giving them information, contracts that we would be looking at, ways that we could be paying, amounts that we would be able to levy to show them the points of how much we could fund their programs. Those types of things would be things that I think that would be beneficial from their perspective to see.
I'd be very glad to do that. And I think it's a great idea if you wanna go to their board meetings.
I think building those connections is a big thing, because a lot of times they look at something and they hear a county, but they don't have a face with it.
Yep.
That's
And I
right.
think those help me a lot to understand really what programs we're doing or what we're involved in. And I know Nathan's the face of our programming here, but this is a big part of our budget and a big part of our future for a county level, so.
Absolutely.
If you have any of those ideas and things that you can help share with us, I would appreciate that.
Will do.
Thank you. Anybody have anything else? We'll be reporting back to you as events warrant, folks. Thank you much, Felicia, appreciate it.
the budget calendar? Okay, Nancy counts out the budget calendar for this next year's budget for your review.
And
Very
there's,
similar to previous years.
and there's probably more dates on there than we actually need. There's some changes to the process this year, so we've cushioned it a little bit while we work through that. But that gives you guys an ability to take a look at your schedules and let us know if there's any days on there that you already absolutely know are an issue for you, because ideally we like to have all the board members here for all of the budget discussion, so you all have an opportunity to shape what we end up with.
All right, folks, anybody else, county employees? Then we'll move on to item 15 with the administration office. Item A is discussion and possible action to approve resolution 11181902, abating interest on delinquent taxes. Do you want to share a little information, or did everybody get a chance to review this item previously?
I guess I reviewed this situation. I think that, I think this board has the ability to do that, but we have to prove public good. I don't see any public good, it's incumbent upon the individual to make sure their payments get delivered and pay attention, and that's just not a precedent I'd be willing to support, so I'm not gonna make a motion to approve that. And what do we can't reverse motion, we just let it die for lack of motion if
Yep.
nobody wants to move, or is that?
Essentially, yep.
'Cause I'm not interested in abating the interest.
I would agree with Jeff on that point, in that, I believe it's up to the individual, it's the individual's responsibility to make sure that those are paid.
And this amount is exactly
$56.
$56, just to let the public know. Yeah, I'm in agreement as on that as well too.
So, I think it may be beneficial for the public to understand what we're voting on. There's, individuals who apparently paid their taxes online, which is, you're certainly able to do. Apparently the wrong account number, and Nancy, you could probably explain it better.
Yep. There was a individual, they paid their property taxes in late August online through the state treasurer system. That payment was rejected due to a wrong account number. A email notification went to our treasurer's office and to the individual. They say they never got that email, and so they weren't aware that their taxes were delinquent until they got a delinquent notice from the treasurer's office. So they came in and asked the treasurer's office to waive that interest. Amy Zybarth, the treasurer, explained that she doesn't have the ability to do that, that's something only the board could do. She had a lot of conversation with him explaining, why she didn't think it was appropriate that interest be waived, because they have some obligation to confirm that their taxes actually went through. The individual still insisted that they wanted the interest waived, so Amy sent them to me to put an item to come before the board. Because you do have the ability to abate taxes, interest, those sorts of things, if you can come to the conclusion that it's in the good of for the good of the public.
Yeah, and one of the other things too, when you make these online payments, you get a confirmation through an email. And you will get something that comes back and tells you payment was made. So if they didn't have their email set up, that'd be another issue where they would be on their responsibility, so not so much an issue from that perspective.
Those of us that, in my business, I make electronic contributions all the time. There's always a disclaimer, and I'm sure it's the same way. You have to check your accounts to make sure, even though you get a confirmation that says your payment's been set, it doesn't say your payment's been made, you have to follow through to make sure that the withdrawal actually happened on time. It happens, and it's unfortunate, but it's not something I'd be willing to waive because it sets a precedent that how do I pick then when it's okay and when it's not.
Well, and one would think they would have realized that payment was not withdrawn from your account or charged to a credit card, however they made the payment. I would think one would notice that.
Would agree.
Well, my understanding is the delinquent notice was sent in the 1st of November, and this individual was not aware until the delinquent notice was received several months later.
Right.
Well, it looks like there's not a consensus for moving forward on this, so we'll move on to item B, 15B, which is discussion and possible action to approve proclamation 11181901, which is Diabetes Awareness Month, November 2019.
Move to approve.
Second.
Jeff has moved and Santos has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
15C, discussion and possible action to approve the reappointment of Virginia Cooper to a 5-year term on the Muscatine County Zoning Commission, which would end on November 7th, 2024.
Move to approve.
Second.
Jeff has moved and Santos has seconded. We thank Virginia for her willingness to serve.
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It is approved. 15D is discussion and possible action authorizing the submission of an ICAP safety grant application in the amount of $1,000 for 2019, as recommended by the Muscatine County Safety Committee.
Included in your packet was information about what the zoning, the safety committee considered the zoning department's request. That's almost 600. The other 400, when you guys approved the grant last year, 600 of that went towards the cost of materials for one of the playgrounds. And the board agreed at that time that when we applied this year, we would apply for the other 400 to cover that.
Move to approve.
Second.
Jeff has moved and Doug has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, anyone have anything else?
I don't think I do.
All right, folks, thanks so much. We're adjourned.